Welcome to a new episode of B&B Movie Reviews. This week we take a trip through time with Tom Hanks, and there's real drama in the cathedral with the election of a new pope.
And we go deep into spoilers with our series review of The Penguin. You've been warned. Stay right there. B&B is up next.
He fought him every single day of his pontificate. And now that he's dead, he wants to destroy his life's work. If Tedesco becomes pope, he will undo 60 years of progress.
You talk as if you're the only alternative, but Adeyemi has the wind behind him.
Adeyemi. Adeyemi, the man who believes that homosexuals should be sent to prison in this world and hell in the next. Adeyemi's not the answer to anything, and you know it. If you want to defeat Tedesco...
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war, and you have to commit to a side.
Cardinal Lawrence and Cardinal Bellini discuss who would be the best fit as the new pope in the suspenseful drama Conclave. Bryan, election season, the perfect film for it, Conclave.
Ooh, yeah.
I had been hearing...
It
came at the right time.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm in better spirits as a result or not, but it is a movie that reflects a lot of my feelings. What an incredible thriller, right? The Pope dies.
Yeah.
You know, Ralph Fiennes is Cardinal Lawrence. He's in charge of maintaining and managing this election. But all these cardinals have their own motivations, their own secrets.
Yeah.
And we have to suss them out. And what I loved about this movie is that it just tells you so little. It withholds so much until the right time. It's a perfectly written script, don't you think?
No, I do think so. I do think the script is impeccably written, and the way that you're right. And I love Ralph Fiennes' character, Cardinal Lawrence, and how he tries to be. I don't know the word, but he tries to just ride that line.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know,
he's got a job to do.
I don't have any agenda. And, you know, Stanley Tucci's Cardinal Bellini is like, no, that's BS.
Yeah.
Like, you want it just as much as any of these other people want it.
And it's super important who gets this position of the Pope. I don't know if you realize that. And there's a faction of the conclave that is leaning right, and there's a faction that's leaning left. There's centrists.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of heat and aggression within that room. Yeah. And then there's also a lot of heat and aggression outside that room that we don't really have access to.
Yes.
But there's a lot of turmoil out there in the world, Bryan.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up that point because it does feel very confined because we are in this kind of enclosed space, living with all of these cardinals, going through this process, not really knowing what's going outside.
Yeah.
Until at certain points in the movie, the outside comes to invade the inside, and then how that kind of changes the dynamics of everything.
And it is a film that's all about performance. You know, you look at the trinity of this movie, you know, Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow. Like, what a treat it is to watch these three actors act against each other, playing very different roles. This is the kind of movie that I feel like people complain doesn't get made anymore.
Okay.
You know, like, oh, it's all superhero cinema now. Like, that's nonsense. Conclave's out there. You just need to go out and watch Conclave.
Find it. You got to find it.
But it is a movie that, you know, is like a wound clock.
Okay.
You know, and it is ticking down. And you think it's going somewhere, and you think certain villains are going to be exposed in a certain way, and some are exposed in a certain way.
Yeah.
But there are twists and turns.
There is.
There are a lot of switchbacks in this film.
Yeah.
And it lands on the perfect note. And I wish the conclave in real life would swing this way.
You don't think that will happen?
No. I mean, at the end of the day, this movie is a fiction.
It is a fiction. But yeah, I think it is extremely cinematic, even though it is in an enclosed space and may feel like a stage play to some degree, but it's very
But
cinematic
I think it
in a
uses
way
the
that-
claustrophobia really
absolutely,
well.
absolutely.
You know, like you feel this building tightening in on itself.
Yeah.
You're starting to get strangled in the way that these characters are being strangled.
Yeah.
Until a choice is made
Yeah.
that offers, well, relief to some.
There you go. What's your rating for this?
Well, we're the B&B show.
Yep.
If we like a movie, we give it a B+. If we
Yep.
don't like a movie, we give it a B-. I absolutely love this movie. In my top 5 right now of the year.
Wow.
Go find
Okay.
Conclave.
Okay, all right. I mean, it's not on my top 10 or top 5 list, but I really
Well,
did.
you have
enjoy-
terrible opinions. We've discussed this.
We've gone over that, so that's already been known. But I do like the movie. I like the movie a lot. I thought it was really good, and it's definitely worth checking out. So it's a B+ for me as
Yeah,
well.
it's no red one.
No, a few things are.
Yeah.
So yes, that is our thought. Those are our thoughts on Conclave. When we return, Robert Zemeckis, Robin Wright, and Tom Hanks reunite after 30 years to bring you this time-spanning story. Here, we'll be right back. Stay right there.
Every minute counts in a poison emergency. That's why Poison Help is standing by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in over 100 languages. Save Poison Help as a contact in your phone today. Call your local Poison Center at 1-800-222-1222.
I'd like you to meet Margaret.
Nice to meet you, Margaret.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Young.
Time sure does fly, doesn't it?
Sure does.
You know, if you like, you could spend the rest of the night here.
I could spend the rest of my life here.
This was our home. We lived here.
Robert Zemeckis reunites with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright since Forrest Gump after 30 years to tell this time-spanning story of love, loss, and hope in one singular space with the film Here. Brad. All right, so Robert Zemeckis.
Comic book movie.
Now, last episode we talked about Ridley Scott, who's hit or miss.
Yeah.
Robert Zemeckis.
Listen, look, Robert Zemeckis has an all-time streak. You look at like Romancing the Stone, Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh, most definitely.
Like Forrest Gump. I know some people have some problems with Forrest Gump,
Yeah.
but like he had a great streak. And then he
absolutely.
does Beowulf,
and then
Christmas
since then-
Carol.
Yeah.
Like, okay, he's had a slump. But clearly he is a filmmaker who really enjoys technology.
Oh, most definitely.
And I think that's
Most
what gets him
definitely.
out of bed. And the idea of making this film that's from a singular, I was gonna say perspective, a singular frame. Like the camera is locked down in one corner of this room and tells a story that spans hundreds of years.
Generations.
Yeah,
Generations.
and I love the experiment, and I do think that it takes a good while before you lock in with the emotions of this film.
Yeah.
There are so many characters, and I think a lot of these characters, a lot of these performers don't have a lot of time, and sometimes it feels a little bit like community theater.
It does. And
You got to be generous with it.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to talk about. And I had mentioned in our last review with Conclave, we've talked about like the idea of something playing out like a stage play. And while watching this movie, it made me think about a show we did a couple of weeks ago where we talked about His Three Daughters. And I had mentioned that I like stories like that kind of are in a single space or a single location that play out like stage plays.
Yeah.
This movie though really does feel like a play because
you're trapped.
Yeah,
You're trapped
literally
with one
trapped
frame.
in that one frame.
Yeah.
And it does feel like the actors are kind of broadcasting or amplifying their performances, especially like don't want to single anybody out, but why am I blanking on this name right now?
Who we talking about? The Vision?
Vision.
Yeah, Paul Bettany.
Paul Bettany.
Yeah.
Paul Bettany. Like sometimes, like his performance, that feels very theatrical.
Well, I think a lot of them feel like they're shouting to the nosebleeds.
Okay.
But again, for me, after about 20 minutes, I kind of dialed in on the register that was being used.
Yeah.
And I like the grand experiment of this movie.
Me too.
And the story, I think, is simplistic. You know, it is about being trapped in this location. You know, for Robin Wright's character, she wants to get out of this house.
Yeah.
But Tom Hanks's character doesn't feel like he can afford to move out from his parents' house.
Yeah.
And they spend all this time kind of like, you know, things start off well for them, and then it bubbles into discontent.
Yeah.
And by the end of the film, they realize, like, hey, life was happening while you were waiting around for something else to happen.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like a simplistic kind of like, okay, we know this. Like, we didn't really learn much about it. To me, this film is about how it is being executed and how it asks the audience to reflect on their frame that they are stuck in.
No, and that's one of the things that I liked about the movie, because while watching this movie, it made me think about, and these are things that I've thought about in the past as well, like when the house you grew up in, like, you know, what was this space 100 years ago, you know, or what was this space at, you know, or what would this space be in another 100 years?
Maybe Ben Franklin lived next door, Brian.
You
just don't know.
We don't know. And I like the way, and like you say, the execution of how it's made, and I like the way it uses the frame to transition to different points in time.
We're experiencing this dissonance all the time.
Yeah.
And it's fun to just like meditate on it. And this movie helped me meditate on the places that I occupy.
Yeah, part of me wishes that we just would have stayed with Tom Hanks and that family. We go to different points in history with different people that lived in that space, and I don't think we necessarily needed to see that.
Agree, kind of.
Okay.
I wish this film was a little bit more like Tree of Life. I wish the narrative was, we were trapped on the timeline.
Yeah.
You know, I like seeing like, okay, here's where the dinosaurs were walking through this living room.
Yeah.
Here's where, you know, some primordial ooze was. Here's where a clan lived. I like that, but it's the switching back and forth that doesn't work for me in here. You know, once we get to Robin Wright and Tom Hanks, that's the story.
Yeah.
And I didn't really love being pulled backward or forward.
Exactly, to see what was in that space outside of what was happening with this family. That's why I was like, once we get into their story, I wanted to stay there. Now, if you hop back and forth within their story, I don't mind.
It could have worked.
That could have worked.
But even that, I would have found to be muddled and confusing.
Yeah, as I'm saying it, I'm like, nah, but I would have just a straightforward story, but just within that space, I thought would have been a little bit more
That being
interesting.
said, again, I'm going to keep using this word, the experiment was compelling enough for me and made the venture worth it.
What's your rating for this?
I give it a B+. It teeters sometimes into the realm of B-, but for me, ultimately, it was a positive experience.
Yeah, I'm kind of seesawing back and forth as far as B- or B+, because I think the movie does pull me out more so than I would want it to because of the jumping around and not staying with that family. But I can't deny how the movie made me feel by the end of it.
Tom Hanks.
Really,
Robin Wright.
Call it manipulative if you want. I don't care.
It's a movie.
Works. So you know what? We talked about it off air. I'm switching back. It's a B+.
Oh, there you go.
It's a B+. So yeah, there we go. It's a B+.
The light side.
I know, for here. So when we return, spoiler alert, you've been warned, we are getting into deep spoilers for The Penguin. So apologies to our crew who hasn't seen it. So stay right there.
Going to cheerleading camp next to the abandoned insane asylum, it's like throwing your blood away.
50% of Americans like watching blood get spilled in horror movies, but only 3% donated.
Now that's scary.
This is your dream. It's so sweet, too. It's so pathetic. You really think people make a float of your dumb face and march it down the street chanting your goddamn name? Oh, Oswald Cobb. Remember him? What a guy. What a little bitch.
Oswald Cobb's impulsive reaction to Alberto Falcone's ridicule of him leads us down Oz's path to possibly becoming the king of Gotham's underworld in the riveting series, The Penguin, currently streaming on Max. So, Brad,
Yes.
so basically, we're spending the rest of this episode talking about The Penguin.
All right, let me buckle up.
It's going to be full spoilers, so apologies to anybody that is listening that hasn't seen the show. So the way I want to kind of approach this is I want to talk about the whole series. We'll kind of get to the finale, but to me, it feels like this show is really the three main characters is Vic, Sophia, and the Penguin. Oz. So I kind of want to go through their arcs, and then if they intersect and some of the other supporting characters, we can kind of delve into that a little bit. And then any other things that you may want to mention. So I guess, what character do we want to start with? Do we want to start with Oz? How do you feel?
Let's hold off on Oz.
Okay, let's start.
Vic, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
yes.
so let's start with Vic. So Vic, I know he had that episode, I forget which one early on, where we have the flashback where we see what happens to his family from the events of the Batman when the Riddler floods Gotham. And I thought being able to see a lot of his backstory in that really kind of colors some of the choices and the decisions that he makes.
Well, Oz gives him an impossible decision, right? You know, Vic, he makes the choice. It's a transformative choice to steal the hubcaps off of Oz's car. He doesn't know whose hubcaps he's stealing. And when he does that, he happens to do it at a moment where Oz is fracturing. And
after killing Alberto.
Yeah, you know, he could have killed Vic in that moment, but for some reason, because of, you know, his childhood, probably fascination with the gangster in his neighborhood, he wants to be that king godfather type who looks after the neighborhood and supplies them with what they need. He decides he's going to offer a little kindness to Vic and not kill him and bring him on. And Vic in those first few episodes is really resistant to being dragged into this Gotham game.
He doesn't feel like, in those first few episodes, he doesn't feel like he's a willing participant, or he feels like he's being manipulated by Oz.
Because he is, and he knows it, but he slowly, you know, keeps sticking by Penguin's side, and then he eventually makes a decision that he can't back away from. And when he does that, he's made another transformative choice. And he cannot possibly see where it's going to end him. He's worried about it probably, you know, but we know on rewatch, like that's the moment where it's over, right? He could have gone away, he could have gone with his girl and chose not to. And what he ultimately chose
leads him down a very dark path.
What's so clever about the Penguin is how much you fall in love with Oz through his relationship with Vic. You know, and you like these two together, and it's a storyline that we have seen in other gangster movies. This is a very recognizable arc for people who have adored The Godfather or Goodfellas or any other Scorsese crime epic. And you know, there's an attractiveness to this criminal element, the people who buck against the system. And so as Vic is starting to have success, you're like, he can be like the Penguin. They can take Gotham. And like the whole point of like the Penguin's going to wrestle Gotham back from these two organized crime families, the Falcones and the Maronis. And you're like, take it back. Give it to the people. And that's the great lie of the Penguin.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Is that Oz is a man of the people, and we'll definitely we'll get.
Let's
more,
put a button in that.
We'll get more into that. So let's switch over to Sophia. Sophia Falcone. I think she gets introduced at the end of the first episode, or either in the second episode. We know that she was released from Arkham. She knows that her brother has been killed. I don't really know if at the beginning she suspects Oz. I believe she does suspect Oz.
Yeah, pretty early on, she starts
pretty-
to question who killed her brother, and it brings her to Oz.
Yeah.
She doesn't really make that decision until several episodes in, and then it becomes the show of Oz versus Sophia.
Yeah.
And Sophia is another character like the Penguin that, as you learn more about her and what her father has done to her and her entire family, and ultimately led to the death of her brother that she loves so much, but also the death of her mom.
Yeah.
You start to root for her as well.
You do.
Right?
Do, yeah.
We love anti-heroes. But what's fantastic about the Penguin is it takes your love of these characters and then throws it out the window and kind of damns you for liking them.
Yeah, it does. And the thing about that back and forth with Oz and Sophia is like there's so many moments in this, and especially once we get to the episode that she finds out that Oz was the one that killed her brother, and we get the flashback scene with her at Arkham. It's like you're flip-flopping sides. Like at one point, like you're saying, you're rooting for Oz. Then once you see that he has the upper hand on her and she's at her lowest point, now you're rooting for Sophia to kind of get or Oz to get his comeuppance by her.
I think we all know we're
forth.
Watching a tragedy.
Yeah.
We just don't know what tragedy we're actually watching.
Yeah, it
until
feels like
the end.
Yeah, and going to that point, it feels like a tragedy on all sides with everybody.
Yeah. These are tropes that we've seen in other gangster pictures, and I think what makes it a little interesting is how they are injected into Gotham.
Yeah.
And they made like this big deal of, we're going to ground the Penguin story. It's not Oswald Cobblepot, it's Oz Cobb, as if that's any more grounded. Okay, sure, whatever. But like, they're not really grounding it in a reality. They're grounding it in another genre, and that genre is the genre of The Sopranos, and The Godfather, Casino. And it works so well. Gotham belongs in this subgenre.
It does. Let's get to Oz. So I want to get into that idea because I think the brilliance of this show is what it did throughout the season of the Penguin with the character of Oz, where it does, that Oz is a villain, but while you're watching this, it's almost like the show has to remind us that he's a villain.
Yeah.
Because we do start to try to root for him.
Right, because we also know that Oz is the Penguin. He is one of the great Batman rogues. This is a world in which the bat signal shines nightly, right? So we're waiting for the Penguin to become the Penguin. And I don't know if we're quite there at the end of this season, but we're one step closer to the Penguin being the Penguin. We know that he has to get rid of the Maronis and the Falcones. And we love watching him work his way to his proper position. But what this film ultimately ends up doing, the show ultimately ends up doing, is revealing like, don't forget, he's a rogue. He is one of the Bat villains. He's not Catwoman. He's not like the semi-antagonistic sidekick.
But that's what I love about the show, because I want to get into a little bit of we should have some more time. I want to get into the relationship that he has with his mother. When you see that relationship at the beginning, you're like, whoa, this is a toxic relationship. Like, how did she raise this?
It's more than toxic, Bryan.
It's more than toxic.
There's something going on there.
Yeah, but then I like how we get to the finale and we get to the end of the show and we get to see what happened to his brothers. And we see that she feels like a prisoner that's kind of trapped in this relationship.
I want to
with
talk
Oz.
to you about the brothers. And again, we're in full spoilers. So we're going to talk about what happens to those kids. When you were watching the second to last episode where they die in the sewers locked behind those doors, how did you interpret Oz's actions?
Oh, as far as
the closing of the door.
How culpable he was in that? No, I think he knew what he was doing.
When you were watching it, did you always feel like, oh, he knows he's murdering him in the moment? I'm killing my brothers?
Oh, man.
Because when I watched it, in the moment, I thought, oh, he made a transformative decision. He knows it, but he doesn't know it, right? But then I get to the end, and after I've absorbed the entire story, I come down on, oh no, he did know he was killing his brothers. He is a true monster. He is the villain. He's
Exactly.
always been in Batman comics.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I fall. When he closes the door on his brothers, he knows that, because he knows his brothers are not coming back home.
Yeah.
And he knows that they're going to drown in those sewers.
Yeah.
And you see it when he's with his mom during the storm, and they're watching that movie Top Hat. And he's just sitting there because he wanted his mother all to himself.
And he gets it.
And he gets it. So he knows what he's doing.
We learned in the last episode, she believes and understands that her son did kill her brothers. And she now has to make the choice of whether or not to keep this little demon in the world or not.
Yeah.
And the decision that she then makes and how that ripples throughout Gotham is delicious.
Yeah. She becomes in a vegetative state. And I think in the episode before, or 2 episodes before, when he finds her in the tub, she tells him, she was like, look, you have to give me this promise that I don't want to be a vegetable. I want you, like, if something happens to me, you have to tell me that you're going to pull the plug. And he's like, he's reluctant to do it, but he says, all right, I'll do it. We get to the end of the show.
He can't
do it.
Because he's a completely selfish creature.
He's a self-serving person. And again, it goes to his villainy.
Yeah.
Like, he's not, it's almost like he loves his mother, but he doesn't respect his mother's wishes.
I think he believes he loves his mother. I think he believes he loves Vic. You know, I think when he kills Vic, he's sorry about it. He just can't have a person like Vic in the world after they have witnessed him at his lowest point.
At his lowest point,
you know?
he sees that
and
as
so,
a weakness.
I'm sorry, Vic. I hate to do this, but I'm going to strangle you to death. And that is when you go, oh, this is a creature that needs to be taken down by the Batman.
Let's go to that. I did want to talk a little bit more about Vic, because I just want to say I love those 2 scenes when he finds out his mother is in the vegetative state and he's crying and he's like, Mom, just tell me that you're proud of me. And you see Vic come up behind him and put his hand on his back. And the way the show just takes, it's so brilliant the way they take that scene, and the very next scene is when he kills him on the bench. So to take that scene where he's consoling Oz, to go right to the very next scene, we're feeling for Oz, and then the very next scene, he kills Vic, and it reminds us that, oh no, this dude is a bad dude. But I guess speculating, we don't know what Matt Reeves has for the Batman Part 2, but where this show leaves Oz, what do you think is next? What do you think is coming
Well, he's taking care of the Maronis. He's taking care of the Falcones. So he has positioned himself into a place where he's the top dog amongst all the little gangs that are still remaining.
Yeah. And he has political friends now in high places.
Yeah. So I feel like, you know, he's propped himself up into a good position.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's going to be shaken from it a little bit, whether in the Batman 2 or after.
Yeah.
We know also that Sophia has hooked up or will hook up with her stepsister,
Selena
Kyle, Catwoman.
Yeah, because they're half sisters.
Those 2 together against Oz, like that's the only conflict that remains at the end of this series.
Yeah.
So they're going to clash, and who survives that?
Yeah, that's true, and I don't know. I'm kind of on team Selena and Sophia.
I don't know if you can be on anybody's team.
That's true.
This is just a wait and see.
This is a wait and see. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Matt Reeves has planned as far as storylines for the Batman Part 2. We
5 to 6 scenes with the Penguin. That's what we know.
I know I know the Penguin will be in it, but where we leave that character as he's rising in the ranks of the underworld. I don't know what the story, again, what Matt Reeves is going to tell, but what we have here with Oz and where it leaves his character and his interactions with the Batman.
I'll be there day one.
I'm there day one. I mean,
first ticket sold to this guy.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I thought this was an absolutely brilliant season of television. One of the best I've seen all year.
Same, agreed.
Yeah.
B plus.
Oh, I was about to go. So I guess where do you go?
B plus. There's
B plus.
Nowhere to go.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's B plus. I mean, I think it's one of the, if not the best show I've seen. I mean, X-Men '97 was pretty great, but yeah,
good comic book show.
Yeah, very good comic book show. So yeah, I guess those are our thoughts on the Penguin. So let's review what we have talked about on this episode. We started with Conclave. Me and Brad gave that a B+. Then we moved over to here. We also gave that a B+. And the first season, only season, limited series of The Penguin. We'll have to wait and see. That's a high B+ for both of us, one of the best of the year. So thank you for joining us on this latest episode of B&B Movie Reviews. Come be a part of the conversation. If you have questions, suggestions, feel free to email us at bnbmoviereviews@gmail.com. And with that, we will see you at the movies.
What do you think that is?
John,
What do you do?
he had a transformative too. So, he's becoming more.
Do you think he's visiting the Riddler? Like, we have these conversations.
More.
Do you want to see a Joker show?